I think you all know me, and I know all of you. We welcome Senator Shaheen, taking a few minutes from your very busy schedule. We are expecting Senator Ayotte and Congressman Guinta, there he is, to walk in. I like to start things on time, out of respect for everybody who shows up on time. Congressman Guinta, welcome.
Hi.
Come on in. Come on down.
Good to see you, Kendall.
Have a seat.
Senator, how are you?
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Made it back.
Yes, before that big snowstorm down in Washington, which 6 inches apparently shuts down our capital. Not here, of course, in New Hampshire.
It comes by. Very good. And again, welcome everybody. We expect Senator Ayotte to be joining us as well. This is a great opportunity and for members of the Home Builders Association and the building profession to get together for a few moments with members of the delegation. Quite often we meet one-on-one and have an opportunity to talk about the issues that are important to the industry, and we will look forward to doing that as time goes on to meet with each of you and the rest of the delegation when we have a little more time and you have a little more time as well. But thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. Let everybody here know that we have about 30 minutes to dialogue with Senator and Congressman and hopefully Senator Ayotte when she gets here to talk about important issues. What's going on in the industry? But first of all, I want to make a couple of introductions. I think, small group, you've introduced yourselves, but I'd like to introduce the President of the New Hampshire Home Builders Association, Buddy Champney, right there. We welcome also the first Vice Chairman of the Board of the National Association of Home Builders, Ed Brady, over here. Welcome, Ed. And we have many other folks important in the industry in the room, and we welcome you all. What's going on in housing? This is what we're about. Obviously, is building and remodeling and developing in this state for the citizens to build homes, to remodel homes, and it's what our members work very hard to do. And in terms of the industry and what's going on, housing starts and so forth, my standard response when I get a request from media or others is that it's better than it was. It could be better. There are still some headwinds that we are facing, economic headwinds, regulatory issues, certainly some market conditions. There are some individual specific issues that we'd like to just put on the table today. We have some handouts that you have in front of you for you and staff, and again, we look forward to following up as time goes on with individual meetings, either in DC when you have some time or back here in the district. In terms of what happened last year in terms of housing starts, here comes Senator Ayotte. Welcome, Senator.
Hi, everyone.
Come on in.
Nice to see you.
Please, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hey, nice to see you. Frank, good to see you. Thank you.
You haven't missed a thing.
I bet you they've covered it really well. So yes. Thank you for having me.
haven't
We just
missed
started.
it.
No such luck.
We blamed everything on you.
But we really appreciate you three taking the time to get together collectively with us and just dialogue for the next few minutes. Again, we've got about 30 minutes or so. Senator Ayotte is coming back, I believe, for our grand opening at 6, maybe?
I am leaving for a short period, but then I'm coming back for the grand opening and looking forward to walking around.
Wonderful, very good. And Governor Hassan will be with us as well as Mayor Gatsis. We're talking about, and I was talking about, what happened last year in New Hampshire briefly with new housing starts and so forth. They were up a little bit over the previous year. Single-family housing was up a little under 5% over the previous year, trending in the right direction. We'd like to see it a little more robust. One of the good points was we note that multifamily housing or multifamily building was up quite a bit more. Basically, that trend brought it up to overall almost 50% increase in the number of total housing units. But again, single-family only about 5%. We need to do more of that. Again, there are a number of headwinds, as I spoke about, either regulatory issues, which we want to talk about on your level, and other types of issues that the industry is dealing with. We have some...
Can I just interrupt for a minute and ask you, why do you think multifamily houses were, building was up so much more than single family?
Dean, can you help answer that? Dean Christian, the Executive Director of Hampshire Housing.
Thank you. Well, that's a good question. I think there is a substantial demand for rental housing in the state. I think the numbers that we've shown you all in the past show that we have not really built rental housing to meet demand historically in the state. And particularly during the last few years, as people have transitioned out of single-family housing, about 20,000 people who lost their homes to foreclosure and other things, as well as people who are waiting longer to buy a home, there's a lot more demand on the rental side of the market. So rents are going up, vacancy rates are down to about 2.5%. It's a great opportunity, actually, for the market to respond to that demand and to start building more rental housing. The thing that sort of impedes that, frankly, are two things. One is the cost of construction is still pretty high relative to what you can charge for rents, and so it's difficult in some cases to do that, except for some very narrow markets. And then frankly, you know, we still are not the most friendly state in the world from a regulatory perspective to particularly higher density and sort of larger scale rental housing development. The cities obviously, you know, do that, but outside of the cities, it is harder for developers to get that done. And I think we did a study last year with some other folks. We did focus groups, including builders and realtors and others, and every one of those focus groups said that regulatory barriers are one of the reasons why the market was not able to respond.
Like zoning laws.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Dean. Again, a lot of it is due to state and local regulatory issues. In terms of federal regulatory issues, which we want to put on the table today, relative to, first of all, impacting the remodeling market, which certainly is a great part of our economic contributions to the state. There is an issue that we want to bring before you that we've done before. It has to do with the lead paint and repair and renovations, and Paul Sullivan is going to speak quickly to that.
Sure, thank you, Kendall. You know, in 2010 is when that legislation went into effect, and the two pieces of it that remain very troubling for the industry, besides the overall compliance, is the test kit. Part of the legislation said that the EPA would provide a bona fide test kit that we could rely on and use. They've failed to do that, and it's now 2015. We've gone back, we've testified at EPA, we've had meetings with EPA. We haven't got anywhere with the test kit. So they're technically not in compliance with their side of the legislation, and they are, at this point, have sort of thrown their hands up in the air and are not going to do anything about the test kit. The other issue was the original opt-out provision. So the lead paint, of course, affects homes 1978 and older. It's occupied, unoccupied, there are children, there are pregnant, it doesn't matter who's in the house, it all falls under that. And it has an enormous cost, frankly, to the homeowner, because those costs are being passed on in the cost of the remodeling projects. That is, in most cases, not necessary. So we'd love to look at that again, but we've been looking at it and we haven't got very far with it. I think right now one of the more important things would be to have a reliable test kit that we can use, that the average remodeler can use and isn't getting either false positives or false negatives all the time.
So just a reliable kit doesn't exist, or that what you're being provided is not reliable?
Does not exist.
Does not exist,
Does not exist.
Okay.
Other than using X-ray technology, which would be very expensive. So clients have that option, or a remodeler has that option to say, hey, we can charge you $300, $400 before the job to go in and do X-rays. Otherwise, you assume lead is present and act accordingly.
And so in the legislation, was the test kit required to be provided in order for you to have to comply and the house to be certified? I mean, so what you're saying is that the legislation requires a test kit and you have to have the testing done to comply, but you can't get the test kit, so there's no way to comply, right?
Correct. You can't get, the test kit never became available. And if you had it, the remodeler would be able to self-test and determine if there was lead present or not. And if there wasn't, they could move on with a normal course of action. So currently the plan is you assume there is lead in every job.
So you're being asked to comply to the law, but the law isn't, but you're not being provided what you were supposed to be provided under the law?
Right.
Correct.
Got it.
Kendall, can I go back to Senator Shaheen's question about federal regulations?
Please do that.
Ed Karen from Merrimack County Savings Bank, also the BFA. We're actively involved in looking at a construction project here in Manchester, a $7 million construction project for apartment buildings here in town. And we just got notification that under the Basel III standards, which affect 8,000 banks, that there's a couple of onerous provisions that are going to impact us. One of them is that these loans are considered high-risk loans now, and they'll be treated 150% of capital. So if you're making a $7 million loan, now you're talking another $10.5 million. For smaller banks like that, that's a major hit against our capital, so it's going to restrict the amount of construction lending that we will do. And it seems to me that Basel III was intended at the international bank and the big banks, and here they are coming down and affecting credit on our side. So in addition to the capital requirements, they're telling us also what the terms of the loans can be. Historically, for a project like this, we require 10% equity into the project and an 80% loan to value. So the government now is saying you must require 15% cash equity, and not against the cost of the project, but against the completed appraised value of the property. It's really adding a burden and restricting construction at a period of time, which I think was the opposite of what Washington would want to do. And in a sector, multifamily lending, where the first-time home buyer market is really dormant because kids coming out of school with all this college debt, they can't qualify into qualified mortgages, and the banks are trying to fill a need, and yet Basel III is saying, gee, we really don't want you doing that type of lending, because that's what it's saying to us. So I would hope that our legislation, and it's great to be in New Hampshire where Washington comes to us. Thank you for coming here. Really, this has had me so frosted that I just learned about it last week, and I wanted to reach out, and here you are. So thanks.
Well, and as you know, our office has weighed in on the Basel III, urging another look at how that is structured, and so far we have not gotten a positive response.
You want to pass it on to your staff. This is a very short.
Oh,
You know about it?
We know about it. As I said, we've weighed in and we've worked with the Bankers Association to try and address this. I think you have too.
I have too, yeah, join in
And
that.
the challenge has been getting a reassessment of it.
It's just too one-sided. Those rules really weren't intended for what you do. It shouldn't apply to
Yeah.
this.
Right.
It's for the largest financial institutions in the world, and you weren't the problem with the too big to fail. And so I think that ultimately, it doesn't make sense to apply those rules to you. And so hopefully there's some sensibility. We've written, I've also, co-sponsored some legislation to provide relief in that regard. But I think
Me too.
we've got to understand that sometimes they're just doing one size fits all in a way that doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
Larry, you had a question on the same topic?
I did, actually. You touched upon it, actually. The students coming out of school are saddled with a significant amount of debt. I happen to have a unique perspective. My wife is a diamond salesperson, and the engagement business is through the roof, which means new housing formation potential should be through the roof. But when I'm now putting on my real estate side of life and looking at these kids coming I'm on the rental world, I ask them, why aren't you just buying a house? And you got a great job. The uncertainty in their student debt is unbelievable. And I didn't realize that. I had student loans, but they were pretty much fixed till I paid them off. Theirs evidently are variable, and NHB followed the student loan problem quite a bit, but it's still a big gray cloud over that potential first home buyer, which is, on one side, I'm disappointed, but on the other side, I don't have any more apartments to rent. And it's a lot of good, qualified people there that we're missing out on.
Absolutely. New Hampshire has the second highest student loan debt in the country. And student loan debt is now higher than credit card debt. So it's the biggest debt category we've got. And I think we need to allow students to refinance their student loans. They should be able to do that just the way you can refinance a house or a car. And I've supported legislation to do that. I think we've got to get that done. It's really in the interest of young people coming out of school, their parents, everybody. It's affecting the economy. We really need to look at what we're doing here.
Careful.
Thank you for that. Next issue, if we may, as we move along in the short period that we have, and it has to do with the Clean Water Act and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And over the last 18 months or so, we've been quite engaged here in New England on a specific issue and received a great deal of help from Senator Ayotte's office and Senator Shaheen's office. We thank you for that. But I'm going to ask Ari Pollack to brief you on this particular issue that continues to raise its ugly head relative to particularly all landowners and our industry in specific.
Sure. Thanks, Kendall. Thanks very much for coming. This is really special. And in fact, during this period of time, there have been a number of Supreme Court cases that have, if anything, narrowed the reach of the navigable waters phrase in the Clean Water Act. So it's very frustrating for the regulated industry to see an agency using the same language that has, if anything, been restricted over the years to expand their own jurisdiction into places where our member developers, builders, folks who are trying to put projects down and for jobs and for our residents to keep running into more and more regulatory hurdles. So what we've been asking is for some pressure.
Decision on the definition of waters in the U.S. And which the EPA is taking in terms of which waters can be regulated under the Clean Water Act. And it's a fairly expansive view, a very expansive view compared to where we've historically been. Now, at the end of the year when we passed the appropriations bill, there was some addressing of that, but mostly in the context of agriculture, because this issue has come up. And so I think there are a couple of things we can do. You know, we've been both writing, obviously, to have the EPA take a more reasonable interpretation of this, because it can't be that a puddle on the side of your land, all of a sudden you've got to get EPA approval. I mean, that makes no sense, and it drives up the cost of everything. And so I think there's a couple of ways we can go about, I think, continuing to express our view to EPA, but also there may be opportunities through the legislative process, like was done in a narrower sense in the appropriations bill passed at the end of the year. And that is another way we could perhaps work together on this to make a more reasonable definition that I can understand from your perspective really adds a lot of cost to what you're trying to do.
I'm sorry.
I met with Kurt Spalding last month, who is the Region 1 EPA administrator, to talk about a whole host of EPA-related issues. This was one of the subject matters, and in a verbal conversation, he was of the opinion that EPA had jurisdiction. I asked him to clarify that in writing, and we're waiting for that clarification. That being said, we do have some alternatives that our office is looking at beyond the first and necessary and appropriate step of the letter correspondence component of trying to work with EPA. And there very well may be, through the appropriations process, at least on the House side, an interest in trying to address this particular issue. We have some time to wait before the appropriations process, so I'm hopeful that we can make some strides, but this is something that I'm also aware of. We're trying to address it specifically with Kurt Spalding and seeing if we can get some help from him before we go to the next level. So we'd be happy to keep you apprised of what our progress is, but I would suspect in the next month we'll have some sort of response and an understanding of what, if any, steps we would take on the House side next.
And if that's correspondence that you're able to share with our group, we sure would be interested in what their justification might be, because we've been students of those cases for a long time, and it would be quite a surprise that they do have that jurisdictional reach. I'll tell you one more piece of the puzzle, which is whatever federal program exists relative to wetlands needs to fit nicely with what the state is regulating, and then, of course, the local communities through their zoning ordinances. We had the recent experience of Army Corps trying to regionalize a lot of their programs, and in particular their wetlands and vernal pool program. And again, we came to your offices for help on that, and that was a successful outreach in the sense that they backed off of the regional approach. What we've now learned is that they're going to recycle that regional project in each of the states. And so, okay, they're not going to do it to us en masse, I should say all of us at once, but they are going to do it in mass. And so the folks in Massachusetts are now reaching out to us to say, you had a lot of success beating this back on a regional basis. How did you do it? Because we've got the same problem now rearing its head on the state level. And don't you know we'll be next, because our permit expires in 2017, and they'll be looking to put that formula forward again.
Well, we should stay in touch on that,
Thank you.
because clearly we need to keep working on it.
Yes, thank you for that. As with all of these issues, we look forward to staying in touch with your office. staff on the specifics of them, and we want to be helpful and help you take care of some of these headwinds. Moving on, if we could, taking again advantage of our limited time, our industry builds the most highly energy efficient homes that are available on the market today. And we're always advocating for sensible energy efficiency standards when it comes to new building, remodeling, and so forth. There does reach a point of diminishing returns, however, when we get to the point that it makes it so costly prohibitive that, again, we are impacting our ability to build housing for a large part of the population in all income strata. Senator Shaheen, we worked with you in the past on energy efficiency issues and so forth, and thank you for that. But I'd asked Paul Moran if he might address our current thoughts with particularly what bill is in the House perhaps and other issues.
Yeah, thank you, Kendall, and thank you, Senators and Congressmen, for sharing this time with us this afternoon. The Department of Energy has been increasingly acting as an advocate on behalf of product manufacturers when code is being promulgated. The Department of Energy does write code, but certainly does support codes. And we know that we've been seeing as codes go through their 3-year cycle of updates that is adding more and more cost and different things, and particularly the energy code has been a steeper curve than anything else in terms of adding costs. But certainly for the people who are building homes, there is a return on investment, and so this can be an investment in many, many cases. However, it gets to a point, as Kendall said, where returns are diminishing. Congressman, if you're aware of it, I'm not sure, there has been a bill introduced, H.R. 1273, and it essentially says the Department of Energy is not going to act as an advocate on behalf of product manufacturers to favor them as we have to reach our metrics. For instance, a wall construction, in order to meet certain codes in New Hampshire, zones 5 and 6, almost necessarily has to have spray foam or some sort of closed cell foam product in order to meet these codes. So the bill also says that there needs to be a 10-year payback on things that are required in code. Certainly, there are things that we can do, and if somebody wants to do them that may not have a 10-year payback that are a good idea to do, but this should be elective and not something that's required. So we hope that that bill will go forward. I don't know, Billy, are we looking for co-sponsors on that stuff?
It was introduced by Representatives Blackburn and Schrader as sort of in it, I don't know if I would use the word companion, but in the same likeness of the Shaheen-Portman bill. Excuse me, a lot of the same language is included there, but makes a few tweaks, as he just mentioned. But.
So to encourage energy efficiency is always a good thing. To provide incentive for it is a good thing. But at some point, there maybe has to be a cap put on what can be mandated and required, which is an expense to people who are building and buying homes, that perhaps, a wise investment might end at a 10-year payback.
And how products get to market and are commercialized. And if we've gotten various provisions from the bill through over the last 2 Congresses, and hopefully we're going to get one that Senator Ayotte worked on called Tenant Star, where we try to make sure that, yes. And we got a successful amendment onto the Keystone bill because that was vetoed. It's not going anywhere on that bill, but we think that we're going to be able to get it through by unanimous consent without going through legislation again. So it's also in Shaheen-Portman, but we think we can move it faster. And according to the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, if that bill passes, we will save consumers about $16 billion a year by 2030, help create about 190,000 jobs, and be the equivalent of taking 22 million cars off the road in terms of pollution savings. So, as you say, and I very much appreciate the home builders' mission statement, including providing energy efficient, quality homes for people, because it is one place where we can really provide significant savings for people. And we ought to be thinking about how to do it, and we can do it. Our legislation shows that, without requiring the kinds of mandates that you're talking about.
If I may, and we thank both of you for being such champions for energy efficiency, and there are many parts of that bill we strongly support, including Tenant Star. There's another piece on green appraisals. One of the things we have been talking to some of the staff about, some of your staff about, is possibly getting some language included in the energy code section of your bill that would prohibit DOE from acting as an advocate. We want them there, we want them to do the technical research and analysis, but when they take that next step and start advocating for certain products, that's been a problem for this industry. And if we can work with you on some language along those lines, that would be wonderful.
Sure, we'll talk to Robert on it.
Thank you for that. We only have a minute or two left. We're getting the eyeball from staff back there. One issue we certainly would like to talk about, very,
Staff.
oh, sure. You don't have to point fingers. But again, out of respect for your busy schedule. Out of respect for your busy schedule, one more item that certainly is familiar to all of us in the room and yourselves in terms of is housing finance reform. I mean, it's been front page for many, many years, if you will. There are certain issues that we're concerned about from the national level in terms of if we would go too far with some of the thoughts that are circulating down there. And I'd ask Dean Christian one more time for just a brief overview.
Oh, I get the simple thing. So very quickly, I know we've spoken about this with you all and with your staffs before, and you've heard from lots of folks. Everybody agrees that the housing finance system needs to be reformed at some components in it. And I know the home builders, because I've read their materials, and I know we as housing finance agencies believe that in the end is going to require a significant federal backstop role. Now, admittedly, there needs to be safeguards, it needs to be better structured than it was before, but any process that thinks that we're going to do this without a significant role for the federal government, we would respectfully suggest is just not going to work. That the history shows that that's the case, and that without that, you cannot be assured that there will be access to affordable, consistent mortgage finance across the country, and that has significant negative implications for first-time buyers and sort of what I refer to as kind of the housing cycle, which is about this
bringing back as the solution to GSEs. There is a difference of opinion on the House side on whether that is the viable option. So I think you probably have more favorable members today in this Congress than you did in the last to support the position of the home builders and the position of the Finance Authority. We're going to actually start holding hearings probably in April-May timeframe on this subject matter. It could be pushed into May, but it's going to be April-May timeframe. So I think it would be rather important for us to, and I think that people want to see some progress in these areas rather than an all or nothing kind of piece of legislation. So I'm certainly willing to sit down and talk with you and try to figure out what that path can be. I honestly I'm not sure that the PATH Act has the ability to pass the House of Representatives. There are some staunch supporters of it on the committee, but there are a whole host of new faces as well that would like to maybe take a different path.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
If I may, I could just say, the Senate did have a bill last year, the Johnson-Crapo bill, that we all supported very, very strongly, and if we could see a similar type of package in the House, I think we could all get behind it, the entire industry.
Very good. Thank you, Billy. This ends the informal session that we have here. This is truly New Hampshire with gathering together members of the delegation, and we certainly appreciate your taking the time to dialogue with the members of the New Hampshire Home Builders Association. If you're able to, come back the weekend and enjoy the 48th New Hampshire State Home Show. Folks, you're welcome to stay as long as you can, and if you have any additional remarks you'd like to make to the group today, feel free to do it now.
I just want to say thank you all for what you do for our economy and how important you are to New Hampshire. And I'm looking forward to coming back, but it's really an honor to be here with my colleagues.
I would echo that and just point out what Kendall started with, which is we're seeing things getting better, but they're not as good as we all want them to be. And so we've got to look at how we can support efforts to see the housing market come back, because if we look historically, what has led us out of recessions in the past in this country has been construction and housing. And the reason I think we're still seeing the economy sluggish, one of the reasons, is because we haven't seen that come back in the way that it has in the past. And so we need to look at ways we can support those efforts.
Yeah, this is a critical component of our economy here. You are a critical component of our economy in New Hampshire. And unfortunately, I've talked to many of you over the last several years who have confided in me about the struggles that your businesses have had over the last several years. We do want to see you come out of that. We want to be supportive from a legislative and a regulatory compliance requirement. I know that there's a lot you're dealing with, but I think that we have a delegation that understands those issues, that wants to work through those issues. So I certainly will try to be as aggressive as I can on the House side. We've all worked very well together in the past and will continue to do so. But as I see it, part of the future of the state, I got to tell you, just as a former mayor of Manchester, we need some stability here in the city in terms of housing prices. We need more stock. We need to replace some existing buildings. I want to see you really busy in the state's largest city, because it's critically important for this and many other areas of the state. So I appreciate how much you have done to hold on and try to deal with the economic conditions, but I'll do everything I can to try to help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Join us
Senator.
next.
Oh, yeah.
Could we get a quick
Hey, Frank.
picture of the three of you?
Frank, can we get a picture?
What's that?
One more. Okay, I think we're good.
Excellent. Thanks, Kendall. Okay, thank you so much.